I'm a long-haul trucker and I spend days and nights crossing empty highways. But that afternoon I saw something I'll never forget. Right in the middle of the road, directly in front of my rig, there was a young woman in handcuffs, completely alone, desperately trying to break free. And the worst part was that, in the distance, a herd of cattle was thundering straight toward her. In that split second, I understood that if I didn't move fast, something terrible could happen. But before I tell you what I did in that moment, I want you to stay with me through this story to the very end, and then tell me in the comments what you thought. Give it a rating from 0 to 10, and let me know which city you're watching from. I really want to get to know you better. And if you like the story, hit that subscribe button to support my work. Some nights the rain comes down angry. It's not that gentle drizzle that cools the plains. It's the kind that pounds the hood of the truck like it's trying to punch straight through the metal. It was on one of those nights that everything changed. I was rolling down a U.S. highway between two small Midwestern towns, hauling a load of grain, when my headlights cut through the darkness and lit up something that had no business being there. A woman, lying on the wet asphalt, her arms locked to the guardrail on the side of the highway, and a dull roar coming from around the bend, loose cattle, crazed and running in the rain. I didn't think. I threw my Freightliner across the lanes at an angle, blocking the road. The impact of the herd shook everything. The left side mirror exploded. When the noise finally died, I climbed down with a flathead screwdriver and pried at the metal until she came free. She looked at me with eyes that carried months of fear. "They're going to kill you for this," she whispered, shaking. Her name was Rachel. She didn't say another word that night. She climbed into the cab, pulled her knees to her chest, and shut her eyes. I kept driving because there was nothing else to do. I took her to the local clinic in the next town. While they checked her out, I stayed outside, staring at the dented bumper and trying to understand what I had just stepped into. The handcuffs were new. They still gleamed under the headlights. Someone had put her there that night, knowing the cattle would come through. It wasn't an accident. It was a setup. What I didn't tell anyone is that I know that stretch of road in another way. For years, quietly, I'd been running that route and taking notes. There's a notebook hidden under my seat. Dates, license plates, ranch names. I'd been watching Mark, a rancher who stomped on everything that reminded him of his humble beginnings. And Rachel was the living reminder he most wanted to erase. 2 days later at Nancy's house, a healer and old family friend, Rachel finally started to talk. Mark had framed her for theft. He used his influence so nobody would believe her. She ran, they found her, and she ended up on that highway as a warning. She still believed that if she explained everything to him face to face, he'd understand. I didn't answer, but inside my gut twisted. I know Mark too well. He acts for the sheer pleasure of watching someone fall apart. Debbie, Nancy's niece and a newly minted legal assistant, came by to visit her aunt and found Rachel there. She recognized Mark's name. The same rancher an old client had tried to sue and then mysteriously backed off. She started digging on her own without telling anyone. In the first week, I tried to move carefully. I reached out to Ryan, a trusted title clerk in the next town over, and asked him to trace where the handcuffs came from without making noise. He, not realizing how serious it was, mentioned it to a coworker. Within 2 days, the story reached Jason, a freight company manager who did business with Mark. Jason told Mark. Mark didn't yell, didn't threaten. He moved with cold precision. He had my registration blocked in the regional freight and weigh station system. Overnight, I couldn't file any manifests. No work, no income, no explanation. A parked truck is a slow, bleeding wound. The rain, which hadn't stopped in days, flooded the truck stop lot. Red mud from the field seeped into everything. Even the notebook of notes began to soften at the edges. Rachel, unaware of the punishment I was taking, decided to act on her own. She rode to Mark's ranch on the back of a borrowed motorcycle. She believed she could fix everything with words. Mark welcomed her with a big smile, offered coffee, spoke in a calm, fatherly voice. Only when she noticed someone listening right outside, Luke, his trusted enforcer, did she feel the chill run down her spine and invent an excuse to leave. She came back shaken, ashamed, without saying what she'd done. But Mark already knew where she was. That same night, a pickup truck pulled up in front of Nancy's house, killed the headlights, and just sat there for 20 minutes. Nobody got out. They just watched. Nancy lit a candle and prayed under her breath. On the 10th day, Debbie made the mistake she'd been afraid of. She found an old deed, a land title with irregularities tied to Mark's name, and excited posted a photo of it in a group chat with her law school friends. In less than 12 hours, she received a formal cease and desist letter signed by Mark's attorney. She deleted everything in a panic, but the original document vanished from the folder where it had been kept. Someone had been in Nancy's small home office while everyone slept. I opened the notebook for Debbie and Rachel. Page by page, years of quiet watching came to light. Dates of illegal cattle shipments with falsified paperwork. Names of public officials who received expensive gifts during election season. Ranches registered in the names of shell owners. The notebook was solid evidence, but on its own, without a proper channel, it was useless. For the first time, I told them where my fear came from. I'm afraid of institutions. A bitter experience in my past, when I tried to report a smaller scheme and was ignored, losing my route and almost losing my truck, left me convinced that justice only works for people with a name that matters. Ethan, a young reporter from a small local radio station who covered agriculture in the region, showed up doing a story on the suspicious blocking of independent truckers in the federal transport system. He found out I was one of the drivers hit by it. He tracked me down in the truck stop lot. On reflex, out of mistrust, I sent him away. But he left a card. The card sat on the dashboard for 3 days before I picked it up. Mark made his next move. He got a city councilman, Joe, to file a formal request for the town to revoke Nancy's permit to use her home as a community healing and support space. She lost her income, her routine. She didn't cry in front of anyone. But at night I heard her praying with a trembling voice. On the 14th day I made the hardest decision of my life. I called Ethan and set up a meeting. But first I used the only resource I still had in one piece, my knowledge of the roads. I knew Mark would be moving cattle with falsified documentation in the early hours of the next morning, along that same highway where I'd found Rachel. I told Ethan to be there with his camera and recorder, and I tipped off state inspectors anonymously about the shipment. The bait was set. But Mark, sensing something off, changed the route at the last minute and sent Luke in his place. The whole plan nearly fell apart. Caroline, a highway inspector I'd met years earlier at a truck stop, with whom I'd always shared a quiet mutual respect, happened to be on duty that night. When I called her on the radio and laid out the situation in detail, names, license plates, times, she hesitated. But she recognized the voice of a man who hadn't asked for a single favor in over 20 years on the road. She called in the team. The noose tightened. Luke was stopped with the illegal load. Ethan's camera captured everything. The paper trail led straight to Mark's name. On the 18th day, as the sun cut through the morning fog and the mud in the lots began to dry, Mark was brought in to give formal statements to the authorities, weighed down by all the evidence gathered against him. Not with soap opera drama, but with the same cold bureaucracy he'd always used as a weapon. The block on my registration was lifted. Nancy's community space opened its doors again. Debbie discovered that the missing deed had been photographed before it disappeared, saved automatically to her phone's cloud storage. The digital copy was enough. Rachel stood in the middle of the truck stop lot under the sun that was finally warm, watching me as I tied down the tarp over my new load before heading out on my next route. She didn't run to me, didn't hug me. She just said, "Thanks for not driving away." I nodded, climbed into the cab. In the mirror that still hasn't been replaced, the left one cracked. I watched her grow smaller as the road stretched out ahead. We live in different towns. Our paths cross only once in a while. But on nights when the weight of the highway presses tight on my chest, or when Rachel feels her legs go weak before a hard decision, each of us can feel, without knowing exactly why, that we're not alone. And that herd of cattle that almost killed her that night? Mark was forced, as part of his civil accountability, to hand over a portion of his disputed land for a community farming project run by local families, the very humble people he'd spent decades trying to erase from the landscape. The land out here has a long memory, and when the storm finally passes, the ground it leaves behind is tougher than before. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you new stories every day that will make your life a little happier. Leave a comment with what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10. And thank you so much for being here.